In this video, I want to talk to you about growth ring orientation and how it affects the stability and success of the projects you build. This is a log, a nice big saw log with some bark and growth rings on it. Now, depending on how boards are cut out of this log, they're going to have very different growth ring patterns on the end. Typically, boards are often cut out of a log like this, but they can also be cut out of a log in a very different orientation to the sides and center of the log. A board like this, when viewed at the end, will have a growth ring pattern that looks like this. This kind of board is called flat sawn, and it's really what most commercial wood looks like when you pull it off the rack in the lumberyard. This other kind of board has a different growth ring orientation in that the growth rings are nearly perpendicular to the faces of the board. Lumber like this is rarer, and it's sometimes called quarter sawn or vertical grained. So why does this matter? Well, it comes down to the amount of movement that the two kinds of lumber exhibit. For a given change in moisture content, flat sawn boards will move sometimes as much as twice the amount of a corresponding quarter sawn board of the same species. There's another issue with flat sawn lumber as well, and that has to do with how it changes shape when it dries out. Now, besides that twice as much wood movement, as I was telling you, the flat sawn lumber has a tendency to cup as it dries if it isn't perfectly dry while you're using it. The bottom line in all this is pretty simple. Quarter sawn lumber is best for wide pieces of solid wood when you can get it. Now let me show you something from my shop. This is a magnified view of the end grain of a couple of boards from my wood rack. This is a piece of spruce here, and this is a piece of basswood down below. This edge here is the face of the two boards put together, and over on the other side is the edge. The spruce lumber is almost perfectly flat sawn, as you can see here. The growth rings are almost exactly parallel to the face of the board. The basswood is different. Its growth rings are more or less 90 degrees to the face of the board, and it makes for a nice, stable piece of lumber. Let me show you one more thing that applies very much to oak lumber of all kinds. This is a piece of red oak, and what I'm going to show you applies to all forms of oak, white oak in particular. Notice these irregular grain features here. You can see them all over this board. These are called ray flecks. This is a really prized grain pattern, and you only see it in quarter sawn or vertical grained oak. So here's an end view of a piece of oak like that, and here are the growth rings. All oak has tiny grain features between and across the growth rings called rays. And when you cut the board quarter sawn from the log, some of those rays will end up at the board surface, and that's what you see here. It's a beautiful feature, and you only ever find it in quarter sawn or vertical grained lumber.